for all.
Second Vice Regent and Aaron, will you read us in the national anthem?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose rough stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ranger. In fact, she is our Captain Jacob Warrick Honorary Regent Phyllis Jamison, who has been a member since 1960. Phyllis is a Warrick County native, born to Dan and Emily Morris 90 years ago on March 6th. She married Charles Jamison, and they had a son, Daniel Lewis Jamison. She is grandmother to John and Sabin and great-grandmother to Adrian, Ian, Logan, and Caden. Phyllis was one of our organizing members and the last surviving of that group. She has been the guide and glue that has held this chapter for many years. We are honored tonight for her to tell us of her memories of 60 years of DAR. Phyllis Jamison.
Madam Regent, members of Captain Jacob Warrick DAR, and guests. It is an honor for me to be here tonight and share with you some of my early experiences in DAR. I am 90 years old. My memory isn't too good, so bear with me. The first time I heard of DAR was when this chapter was being organized. My mother came to me and said, there is a DAR chapter being organized in Boonville, and we are going to join. It didn't take me long to catch on that the Daughters of the American Revolution is the greatest organization for women in America. There are many other patriotic organizations for women, but they are imitations of DAR. I belong to 4 other organizations. I enjoy the meetings and the fellowship, but they aren't DAR. We learned the pledge to the flag and the Star-Spangled Banner in grade school, but I had never heard the American's Creed. I enjoy the ritual that opens each meeting. I took it all in for the first few years, became active and held a few small offices. Then Bessie Margaret Helmbach started taking me to state and district meetings. I enjoyed that very much. I learned genealogy by hanging out with Opal Phillips and Zella Davidson. Opal became a volunteer genealogist at the old Boonville Library. She helped many people with their family research. In the meantime, she wrote many family histories about the people in Warrick County. When the new Boonville Library was built, Opal passed the genealogy job to me. I loved it. Some years later, Nancy Russell became chapter registrar and took over as chapter genealogist as well. She has done a great job. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Phyllis.
I enjoy going to the state meetings where I met a lot of interesting people and made a lot of friends. My first state job was state chairman of chapter organization. Della Davidson was vice chairman. We had a ball. We traveled all over the state organizing new chapters. In 1968, I, along with several chapter members, signed up to go to Continental Congress on a chartered bus. I ran out and bought some luggage, some clothes, including a hat and white gloves. I was ready to go. Then we got word that the bus had been canceled. I was brokenhearted. I decided I was going the next year if I had to go alone. The spring of 1969 came around. I was the only member of this chapter who signed up to go. Two ladies from Huntingburg heard I would be traveling alone. They invited me to join them. One of the ladies was Ruth Allen, a retired school teacher. She was ready to go.
GPS signal lost.
We went by Greyhound bus. When did you last see a Greyhound bus? 50, 60 years ago, they were up and down the highway every place. Now, you never see one. When we arrived at the bus station in Washington, D.C., Ruth hailed a taxi cab. The driver was Mr. Powell, a nice young black man. After he delivered us to our hotel, Ruth said, "Now, Mr. Powell, if you don't charge us too much, we'll let you drive us around town." Mr. Powell not only drove us around that week, he drove me 41 straight years in a row.
Wow.
We visited our Congressman Roger Zion and had our picture taken with him. The next day we put on our hats and went to DAR. My, what a thrill. An entire city block of beautiful buildings, which included Constitution Hall, where our meetings are held. Opening night was worth the whole trip. The President of the United States gave a welcome.
Wow.
And the military band played the Stars and Stripes Forever as the President General entered. The American flag came down from the ceiling and lingered over her head. That was very touching, and it was signaling the opening of Continental Congress. It was a fantastic experience. I knew then that I would go again. While serving on the Indiana State Board, I became great friends with Marilyn Creedon and Janice Fitzgerald, both regents, state regents. That led to a lot of traveling. Janice is here with me tonight. National DAR sponsors many trips to foreign countries. All members are welcome to go. We have DAR chapters in several other countries. We have many American citizens living abroad. Mexico has 4 chapters. Many Americans retire to Mexico because of the weather and also living is so much cheaper down there. Their state conferences is in February. I have attended 6 times or more. I love Mexico. In 1983, we went to France to celebrate the Treaty of Paris. I don't remember much about it. We also visited Normandy and Versailles. And Janice tells me that we had a fantastic meeting in Versailles, and they had the most elegant food, but I don't remember anything about it. But the thing I do remember, leaving the meeting, we were riding down the street, and I was reading the street signs, and there was one that said, Rue Renee D. St. Julian. I was in shock. Green D. St. Julian was my great-great-great-grandfather. And here in Paris, they had a street named after him.
Huh, good.
In June of 1985, I went with the DAR to England. A couple days before we were ready to leave, I got a postcard saying, Ascot is on. Don't forget your hat. And that's all it said. I wasn't familiar with Ascot, but my Uncle Joe Badiger lived a couple doors from me. Joe would know. He explained that Ascot was a famous racetrack in London frequented by the Queen Elizabeth. On this trip, I roomed with May Ann Turner, a younger member from northern Indiana. England has many historical places. We visited a lot of them. We were invited to 3 tea parties and 2 cocktail parties. And I don't believe a thing about that, but it's here in my diary. Then it was time to go to Ascot. We put on our hats and went. We were seated in the Queen's enclosure, which was a middle section of 3 big sets of bleachers. Now, they might not call them bleachers in England, but they were bleachers to me. We were seated halfway up, which is quite a ways. And there was perhaps a dozen DAR members in the whole bunch. We were the only people in the Queen's enclosure. We sat and waited. Then someone yelled, "The Queen is coming through the gate." Everyone stood up. 3 horse-drawn carriages came toward us. Queen Elizabeth was in the first carriage. Princess Di and the Queen Mother were in the second carriage. The third carriage had 3 ladies that we didn't recognize. It looked like they were just passing by. May Ann and I ran as fast as we could down those steps to get a better look. There was a fence at the bottom between us and the racetrack. I grabbed the fence and hoisted myself up a couple. When I stopped, I was eye level with the Queen of England. We were perhaps 8 or 10 feet from her. The Queen was a very solemn-looking lady. She had a black hat. Princess Di had a shy, sweet smile. She had on a black and white hat. They soon drove away, and I don't remember that they ever greeted our group in any way. I never heard a word or saw a wave. We sat there expecting to see the horse race. No horses showed up and no people showed up. We left London the next day, visited other historical places. We visited the home of Princess Di's father and stepmother. We did meet them. England is about the size of Alabama. I don't see how they squeeze so much history into just We arrived home the 4th of July in time for the family 4th of July picnic at my house next door. The Indiana State Conference was in October. 4 of us who went to England gave a program on our trip.
GPS signal lost.
Mid-October, I attended the National Conference of the Dames of the Court of Honor in St. Louis. Great meeting and a tour of the city. When I returned home, my husband said, Phyllis Schlafly has called to invite you to go with her and a group to Geneva, Switzerland for the Reagan-Gorbachev summit meeting.
Wow.
And he added, I think you should go. 12 days later, I was on my way. I joined 5 or 6 other Indiana DAR in Indianapolis. We were interviewed by Channel 6. We drove to Chicago and flew from there. It was cold in Geneva. We had to go out and buy boots. There were many well-known and famous people at that meeting. Are you all familiar with Phyllis Schlafly?
Yes.
Yes.
For many years, she was the national chairman of National Defense. I admired her more than anyone else in DAR. We flew into Chicago, picked up our car, and drove home. When I got home, I went to bed with my clothes on. I had several other DAR trips. Janice and I went to Italy for some kind of a marker dedication. That was the year 2000. I urged more of our members to attend more state meetings, meet the officers, and take trips with them. You won't be sorry. DAR has changed a little in 60 years, not many hats and white gloves. It's hard to find a store now that sells hats. 50, 60 years ago, a Ross store in Boonville had a big section of hats, as did the Mumble store. And in Evansville, they had hat shops that sold nothing but hats. Don't see that anymore. And if hats ever come back into I'm prepared. And I have my white gloves. And I went out, we have a storage building out back of my house, and I went out there the other day looking for something. And to my surprise, there were 3 hat boxes out there. And I opened them up, and they had 8 of the ugliest I ever saw in my life. And Halloween's coming up. And if any of you ladies need an ugly hat for Halloween, after 60 years in DAR, I still believe it is the greatest organization for women, not only in the United States, but in the world. DAR was not only fun and games. There's much to be learned about history and foreign affairs. It has been 10 years or so since I attended Continental Congress. Mary Lou Winsett and I rode with Cheryl Baxter last time. Cheryl is now state regent of the Indiana DAR. I'm very proud of Cheryl. Thank you for listening to my stories.
Thank you, Phyllis. That was wonderful. We're so glad you came tonight. And we would like to take a little trip down memory lane as well to honor you this evening. And your grandsons are going to bring a chair. We want you to sit in the place of honor up here and listen to a couple of things we want to say. Madam Regent, members and guests, Phyllis, we're so glad you could come tonight, and we want to honor Phyllis with some tributes and some stories. It's hard to find only one adjective to describe Phyllis. She is so intelligent, tenacious, savvy, witty, persistent to complete a job, a hard worker, and as fellow DAR member Zella Davison said to me more than once, Phyllis is so much fun. You always have a good time when you travel with Phyllis. Phyllis is the only Captain Jacob Warrick NSDAR chapter organizing member still living. She's our last girl standing. It's just not possible to list everything she's done serving DAR, but we want to mention some of her DAR endeavors, and we'll set the stage by what was happening outside Warrick County while Phyllis was helping organize Captain Jacob Warrick DAR. So for a little perspective, in 1960, NASA launched our first weather satellite. The novel To Kill a Mockingbird was published. The films Ben-Hur and Psycho premiered. The American Heart Association for the first time linked smoking to heart disease. A young boxer from Louisville, Kentucky named Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, won a gold medal at the Olympics and also won his first professional match. The first heart pacemaker was implanted. Roy Orbison's hit song was Only the Lonely, and the new toy craze by the Ohio Art Company was a little thing called Etch-a-Sketch. Bread was 20 cents a loaf, a new house averaged $12,000, and gas was 25 cents a gallon. Meanwhile, back in Boonville, Captain Jacob Warrick NSDAR was organized on February 1st with 30 members. They were off in genealogy running. That number of 30 would swell to over 170 members in a few short years. There were a plethora of ladies who spent countless hours running around cemeteries with pencils and papers, etching tombstone writings and recording what they found. Phyllis and Opal Phillips and Carrie Hart spent numerous hours at courthouses cataloging records and began collections for what is now our special Indiana room at this library. Phyllis wrote books and is still writing. We are still getting thank you notes from state and national for Phyllis's donations of books to the National DAR Library in Washington. She's mentioned in emails, always in a thankful and loving manner by other genealogists. We have a recent note here. Dear Chapter Regent, I would like to thank your member, Phyllis Jamison, for her book donation to the National DAR Library in Washington. Ms. Jamison's donations add valuable resources to the DAR Library. Thank you, Indiana State Librarian. And then an email from Elisa Smith about some genealogy and some lines. And there's a note in here. Also, could you let Phyllis Jamison know that I'm going after our Fleener line to try and get Adam Fleener approved? We both descend from Isaac. I had first contact with her before joining your chapter. She is such a sweetheart. I've read a lot of her writings in the Boonville Library. I also found a book that transcribed Bibles of Warrick County by our chapter. It helped with my Pemberton connections that led the way to William Haynes. No doubt she has been the engine to keep that history alive. She's been instrumental in getting markers placed all over, just all over. On the State House lawn, at Darlington, which was the first Warrick County seat, for Thomas Bolin on a hill way out in the country near Tell City. More recently for Jesse Boone at Harpole Cemetery, just outside of town. And she wanted us to be sure to know that it was Jesse Boone that put the Boone in Boonville. She has lots of stories, and she's made many friends at the national level. In looking through our chapter records, she is named repeatedly for serving in offices and on committees. She served as this chapter's registrar for over 32 years. She also served as regent and many other offices. She was state historian, state chapter organizing chair, state parliamentarian committee, state chair of Liberty Love Day, Science Microfilm Center chair, NSDAR speaker staff, Lineage Research Committee, National Vice Chair of the DAR Library, Chair of Membership Lineage, Volunteer Genealogists and Supplementals, National Planning Committee Chair, Indiana Southern District Director, and more. She was a speaker many times, many places, just like tonight. She wrote her talks, and I don't know if you noticed, she hand wrote what she said tonight. She writes her talks. And she is in demand to speak at all kinds of groups. Some of her programs were, and I went through a stack of chapter books, and these are the titles of some of her talks. Miss Liberty at 100 Years, a description of the life and times of the American soldier, About America the Beautiful, Preparing Acceptable Application Papers, What I Do in Washington as a member of the Volunteer Genealogists and Supplementals Committee, Patriotism in Story and Song, a tribute to our state, Ain't God Good to Indiana, Early Presence of Blacks in Warrick County, Indiana, the Underground Railroad, The DAR Goes to Italy, the famous DAR murder mystery, the 100th anniversary of the Memorial Continental Hall, Fashion at Continental Congress, 1783, the Treaty of Paris, 225th anniversary of the signing, You're a Grand Old Flag, and more. There have been numerous newspaper articles and news television stories on Phyllis and her programs. She was the auctioneer at our chapter auction at least 6 times that I found in writing. She chaired many receptions, including the one for 50 years of this Captain Jacob Warrick chapter from 1960 to 2010. I'm in complete awe of this woman and all she's done in her life. She has a fine family, and I'm so glad some of them could be here tonight. I want to close my part with an old DAR poem. It's called Heaven Knows. It's from the Indiana DAR News in 1989. A lady arrived at the pearly gate, and the angel in charge said, "How come you're late?" The lady said, "It was fall forum. I was needed there to make a quorum. The Continental Congress delayed me a bit, and our chapter meeting, I couldn't miss it." And the angel said, "This is unheard of, you know. We canceled your reservation, no show. I'll have to check with the boss, you see, because it is no longer up to me." Then the lady said, "I've come so far, and I'm a member of the DAR." The angel was really at a loss and mumbled, "I'll tell that to the boss." Then he disappeared with a flash of light, and the pearls of the gate went dark as night. When finally he caught the boss's ear, God turned to him and said, "Dear, dear, there certainly would be heck to pay if we decided to turn her away. It would be a mistake, sure as sin, so for goodness sake, do let her in. Give her wings, a harp, and a halo too. You can skip the harp if we have too few. Then send her up to that special cloud marked DAR members allowed. The one that has the great large hall for meetings every spring and fall. And give her a job that suits her best, because DARs never seem to rest. I'll keep them busy, never fear. Heaven knows I need them here." So the angel returned and relit the pearls and said, "There's something special about you girls. My boss just told me to never bar the entrance to heaven to a DAR." Now, we are glad to have have tonight with us our Indiana State DAR Vice Regent and our chapter member, Miss Sherry Baxter. And Madam State Vice Regent has something for us.
So happy to be here. On behalf of our State Regent, Charlotte Blair, and the nearly 5,000 Indiana DAR daughters, we thought that was doing good, Janice. Oh no, well then we need to get to work.
Phyllis, you cannot retire yet.
It's off to Indianapolis. She wants to thank you for your 60 years of service to our society. She said she was disappointed she couldn't be here this evening, and she would like to extend a special invitation for you to come to Jasper in August to the district meeting so she can meet you. I told her you still get around. And then Phyllis, for me, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful mentor. I have everything that I've accomplished, I think, to thank you for. And she told about our trip to Washington, D.C. Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful. And as she said, you have to make those trips because you don't know DAR until you get out of your little community and experience the rest. And you make many lifelong friends, and I thank you for that. We got in my Mazda and took off. and I remember having the GPS, and we went around DuPont Circle, and the stupid thing would not tell me to turn, so I just kept going around. And I said, okay girls, I think we're just gonna pick one of these and go. And we eventually found our way, but in this bag, my dear, are 60 Hershey bars. Oh, you remember you having a sweet tooth, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's one for every year.
Oh, my.
Just don't eat them all at once. Thank you, Phyllis.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Madam State Vice Regent. Does anyone have a memory or a comment you want to share? Yes,
May I come to the front?
you sure may. This is Carol Weatherholt.
Phyllis, I remember you on the bus.
You do.
Yes. But what happens on the bus stays on the bus. That's the rule of the bus. My friend and I, Janine Martin, had the bus tour to Washington back years ago. And that's my first memory of you.
Really?
Yes.
Did I behave myself?
What happens on the bus? And this card is from all of the DAR daughters in Indiana, and to congratulate you on this wonderful milestone.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. You need to go to Continental Congress one more time.
One more time.
I'll try.
Anyone else? Dr. Brown?
Morning, Phil, or good morning, or afternoon, ladies, or evening, whatever it is. I'm representing a little bit of the SAR, that's the Sons of American Revolution, but my mother was one of the daughters here, and she thought this history was just fabulous. She started looking at her records in the 70s, and there's a lot of work then. The internet wasn't as available at that time, but anyway, So she was doing that, and then about the 80s, she brought up a lady named Phyllis Jamison, and I wasn't around much. And then about the 90s, she brought her up again, and then I still hadn't met her. But about in the 2000s, early 2000s, I ended up meeting her, and boy, I went back to Mother and I said, "Oh, Mother, guess who I met?" And she was so thrilled. And she said, "Well, she hasn't missed a national meeting in 50 years. That might be a little exaggeration, but that is a rare trait for anybody to make that many national meetings." And then, I think they mentioned earlier all of her accomplishments. If I had to create one SAR chapter, which we've tried to create, I don't do DAR chapters, but a DAR chapter would take a lot of work. We got a CAR person trying to create a CR chapter, but one is a lot of work. She created 5.
Wow.
5. I mean, you know how much work that is? Oh my gosh. We've just got one youngster in here, but all of us need to know that these youngsters, we need to teach them more. And I've gone to Phyllis's house, and her house, the library is about a quarter the size of this, but it's packed with books. And what Marcia Howe said in our library about my dad, said, "Boy, when we lose him, we lose what's between his ears, and there's no replacing that." And with Phyllis, what's between her ears is so much. And I've gone and tried to record her and some things, but I just can't get it all out of there. But anyway, this is a fabulous thing you've done for her, and she's done a fabulous thing for Warrick County and many other places in Indiana, and our hats are all off to you, Phyllis.
Does anyone else want to share? And I'll turn it over to our Madam Regent.
Phyllis, I also have a card that I went to a training session, and one of the ladies there was not able to come, but she had a card for you, so I'll let that with you. I was trying to see if there was anything else here that Nancy did a great job on covering the history of Phyllis with this chapter, and we have so much to be thankful for. She has been the glue that has held this chapter together, and just an amazing woman to share all of her knowledge of this county and others outside of the county for their history. And so, you probably didn't realize this was going to be all about you, but here is your certificate for 60 years
Oh my goodness.
of service to DAR,
Thank you.
as well as your 60-year pin.
Your room or ribbon?
Yes, and that's a good question there. Is there room on her ribbon?
No.
No. I do see the 25-year pin, so I'm just going to move this one, and it might not be in the order that it's supposed to be, but we'll let you change that when you get home.
I don't think the insignia police will come. How many Patriot bars does she have on there?
She has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. She has 9 Patriot bars on there. And that is a ton of work. Thank you, Phyllis, for doing all that you've done for this chapter.
Thank you. I didn't expect anything.
It was supposed to be a surprise, so I'm glad that it was. Okay, if no one else has anything that they would like to share, this is your last chance.
Here's a lady. Miss
Go right ahead.
When I came into DAR, my name's Teresa Barnett Hooker. And Annis Barnett was my mother, and she and Phyllis were very good friends. And Zella Davidson and Phyllis are the ones that helped me prepare my papers to come into DAR. And I'm ever thankful for that. Thank you, Phyllis.
Okay, I am going to close out the program, and we will go into a short business section. So family members and guests, you are welcome to leave, because if you've ever been in business section, business meetings, you kind of know how they are. Unless you're involved within